My name is Demi Sadiq, and I will be presenting gender equity in sports. So, equity versus equality. So, in this picture, we have equity versus equality. So, you see on the left that all of them are standing on the same size stool, but not all of them can see. On the right, all of them, I think the father gave his stool to the youngest son, and now all of them can now see. So gender equity implies fairness, while gender equality implies sameness. There is a common misconception that equity and equality mean the same thing, that they can be used interchangeably. However, they do not and they cannot. If in sports, equality is the end goal, then equity is what is needed to get there. Gender equity means fairness of treatment for men and women according to their needs. Equity brings forth a challenge and an opportunity. A challenge, meaning a distinction between equality, is unclear to most people, and bringing clarity is an important step to eliminating the gender equity gap. An opportunity, meaning we now have the insights from the challenge and are now possible to move forward and bring gender equality in sports. So, current gender ideology in sports. So, we can't have equity without talking about this gender ideology in sports. So while trying to find pictures for this topic, I noticed that majority of the men are shown on the magazine covers playing their sports. So if you look at the pictures of like LeBron James and Michael Jordan, they're like depicted as these strong, muscular, like sexy men. Like there's even this cover of like LeBron James depicted as like this Greek god, which just shows like the men are viewed as like superior athletes to the women, like the godlike superheroes, and like the women are like domesticated, and they're supposed to be just as athletic as the men are, but they're supposed to be still domesticated. And a lot of the covers of the men will still have women, but they're sexualized. And to me, it's like even rare to find a woman in full uniform. Like if you look at the left in her like full soccer uniform, like it was very rare to even find this picture, and it's even rare to find a woman on a magazine cover by herself in general. Like when I was doing research for this topic and I typed in sports cover magazine, it was so hard for me to find women on magazine covers because the only thing that popped up were men after men after men on magazine covers, and it was just the results were just shocking to me. So Title IX. So Title IX states that no person in the US shall on the basis of sex be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So Congress passed Title IX of the Educational Amendments in 1972 only after years of lobbying by feminist and concerned citizens. So even today, opposition to Title IX remains strong, but after more than several years, all court decisions have upheld its legally and its enforcement guidelines. So I remember reading that those objecting to the law claimed that mandating equity was unfair because boys and men were naturally suited for sports, whereas girls and women were not. Like in 1971, there were like 3.7 million boys playing like high school sports and only 295,000 girls, and like the same goes for college, like 180,000 men and like only I think 32,000 women or something like that. So before Title IX, most colleges used 2% of their athletic budgets on female sports. So like the impact of Title IX in school sports is clear because between 1971 and 2014, the number of women on college teams increased from 32,000 to 200,000. So one major outcome of Title IX is that many boys and women have learned to respect women as athletes because that rarely occurred prior to the 1900s. So this is just a quote that I thought was that I found that was just really like fitting. So there's arguably no piece of progressive legislation that touched more people's lives than Title IX, which allowed equal opportunity in education and sports. So the global women's rights movement. So to the right are some female athletes that I think have a huge impact on sports before Title IX. They broke barriers for women everywhere and were notable trailblazers. So the global women's rights movement over the past half century has emphasized that girls and women are enhanced as a human history when she defiantly became the first woman to officially run in the Boston Marathon, even as the race officials tried to physically stop her. And you can even see that in the picture. The race officials trying to stop her, but I find it like shocking that the men around her are trying to push the official off her and allow her to run with them. So next to Switzer, we have Billie Jean King. So she defeated Bobby Riggs, a notorious sexist, in what is to be called Battle of the Sexes. So Bobby Riggs, time after time, constantly slammed the quality of women's tennis. King went on to win so many more championships, but her victory at the Battle of the Sexes energized women's tennis. And one I think interesting fact is that she battled Riggs here at the Astrodome in Houston. And like thousands of people came to watch this. So below Switzer, in the second row here on the left, you have Babe Dickinson. And her name isn't actually Babe. They actually nicknamed her Babe because of her like tomboyish looks. And I think it was kind of like a joke actually. But that's beside the point. She was a stud athlete that proved a girl could do anything. I mean, she played just about any sport you could think of, like basketball, track, golf, baseball, tennis, diving, I mean, boxing, handball, bowling, cycling, like you name it, she played it. When asked what she didn't play, she replied dolls. She was voted the greatest female athlete of the first half of the 20th century, and then 6 more times after that. She was the greatest athlete at a time when it was unacceptable for women to be good at sports. And then right next to her, you have William Rudolph. She survived bouts of polio and scarlet fever, which forced her to wear a brace on her leg. She was told she would never be able to walk again, yet she broke those odds. She competed in her first Olympic Games in 1956 and won a bronze medal. And then she competed a few more times after that, and she went on to win the Associate Press Female Athlete of the Year award in 1961. She was inducted into the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame and started an organization to help amateur track and field stars. Rudolph became the first woman to receive the National Collegiate Athletic Association Silver Anniversary Award. So last but not least, we have Gertrude Elderly. She became the first woman to swim across the English Channel. She was to be taken seriously because she beat the 5 previous records that were all made by men. She first began her attempt in 1925. She was 23 miles in. She swam 23 miles in 8 hours. The people in a boat that were supposed to look after her thought she might be unconscious in the water, so somebody yelled, "She's drowning." They touched her, which disqualified her, yet she went on to try again, where she set a new record. So gender equity today. So we are still very behind on this even today. So we have many great women athletes that have proven their superiority over men, like the ones shown in pictures to the right. So even though all these great female athletes have won and proven themselves again and again, the problem stands in getting the same fair treatment as the men. Just take the U.S. women's national soccer team, for example. I mean, they have qualified over and over again for the World Cup, and they have won like so many medals, whereas the men, I mean, the women, they just won the last World Cup, and the men, they haven't even like qualified in I don't know how many times, and yet the men are still paid 3 times as much as the women. I mean, it's just not fair. I mean, during the 80s and 90s, many women have trouble getting fair treatment like the men, despite all these incredible wins. Another problem that women face is hyperandrogenism. So, Magadi Castor Semenya was an 18-year-old woman from South Africa. She was born and raised a female and always identified herself as female. But when she ran a surprisingly good time and won a gold medal in the 2009 World Championships, some of her opponents and officials from other nations questioned her sex identification. According to their standards, she didn't fit their typical feminine culture and accused her of not being a real woman. Semenya did not come from a culture where body management practices involve styling hair and using makeup and whitening of the teeth, etc., to appear more feminine. So the IAAF demanded that she have multiple examinations and tests to identify her true sex. So nearly a year later, the officials in the governing body announced that Semenya was indeed a woman and allowed her to compete again. But so much controversy surrounded her that she fell into depression. Fortunately for her, she went on to make a strong comeback at the 2011 and 2012 Olympics. So the female fairness policy that the IOC and other sport organizations developed in response to Semenya's case was put into action in 2011 and 2012. This involves testing only women who arouse suspicion by appearing too masculine to compete fairly in women's sports events. Now, this was not the new approach. The new approach was the hyperandrogenism, a condition that exists when women have naturally elevated androgen levels. So, androgens are steroid hormones that are produced by glands in the human body's endocrine system. Now, I think this whole situation is unfair and sexist because even males can produce androgenisms. I mean, they're even referred to as male hormones. You don't even see males getting pulled aside for being too feminine, so why should females get pulled aside for this? Like, it wasn't fair. So, male versus female salaries. So, it's not a secret that women make way less than men do, and here are two prime examples for this. So, the first one is the NBA and the WNBA. So, the base salary already, I mean, just look at this. They're making what, double? Wow. 30,000. Wow. NBA, the maximum they can get, the millions. Over here, 80,000. The average in the millions, 55,000. So the WNBA, it's not like they want just as much as the NBA does, because they know that they can't get that much because they're in the millions. They at least just want the same base salary, because I mean, the veterans and the rookies, look at the difference there. There's not much of a difference there. So we can move on to the women's national soccer team. The men are in blue and the women are in pink. Let's take the World Cup, for example. If the women get first place in a World Cup, look at the bonus they get. But look at if the men get first place. Look at that difference there. And then look at the difference in second place and then third place. And let's go back to what I just said earlier of how many times the women have won something in the World Cup and how many times the men have won something in the World Cup. Yeah. So you can't talk about salaries without talking about media coverage. So the salaries go hand in hand with media coverage. The women's sports are covered far less often and in less detailed than the men's sports. So 40% of all sports participants are female, but they only get 4% of media coverage. And let's look at this little graph over here is women's sports. This little area right here. And revenue pays a big part in salary. And I was reading something that the Olympics like sometimes to put women's activities at night while everyone's sleeping and then show the men activities during the day. It's these little trick that the media does that affects how the women get paid. Women demanding a change. These are just a few of the athletes that have recently decided to demand a change. So the U.S. women's national soccer team has been associated with leading the way in the fight for gender equity in sports. In the 2019 World Cup in France, the squad took a stand against discrimination and sued the U.S. Soccer for equal pay and treatment. Before winning a gold medal in the 2018 Olympic Games, the U.S. women's national ice hockey team was trying to battle for equal pay. They threatened to boycott the 2017 IIHF World Championships if the settlement was not made with the USA Hockey for equal treatment to men's team. The Williams sisters recently decided to, not recently, but like they decided to stand up and demand a change because they know that their voices have a huge impact. Even though the Wimbledon finally ended its pay gap in 2007, the Williams sisters have not held back when it comes to speaking out to equal pay. So this is just a little summary because gender equity and equality are not the same thing. Gender equity has come a long way, but not long enough. Title IX has made some progress over the past 20 years. If women want something done in sports, they must sue or protest their way to it.